From the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, this is the Politics in the Past Desert Dialogues podcast brought to you by the Center for American Institutions at Arizona State University. I'm Jack Hinrichs filling in again for Rob Ferguson, who is still in London presenting at a conference, having fun in London town. But I am joined by two debaters from the ASU Regents Cup team, Shavya Aragam and Andrea Jamieson. Thank you for joining me, Shavya and Andrea.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, so we had Dr. Jenny Bryan, who is one of the coaches of the ASU Regents Cup team, on our previous podcast. If you, the listener, haven't listened to that before listening to this, I would recommend you go back to that, get some context. It was a fantastic interview, and then come back here. But Dr. Bryan, being one of the suits, being one of the people in charge, can only give us one perspective on the Regents Cup competition. We're incredibly lucky this morning to have two competitors from the ASU team join us. We have two debaters who are joining us this morning, and I'm excited to get their take on the competition. But before we get there, first, I'm curious as to both of your academic backgrounds and what got you interested in the Regents Cup debate. Shravya, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, of course. So, for context, I am currently a double major majoring in business management as well as biology. So, I've really kind of delved into this experience and the want to learn from an interdisciplinary angle. And I figured that, what better way than to kind of engage with Regents Cup, which really helps us kind of bridge together all of our different perspectives and kind of, speak to each other through those interdisciplinary lenses. So that's what got me involved.
Yeah. And Andrea?
Yeah, so I recently graduated from ASU in 2024 with my Bachelor's of Science in Psychology because I was really interested in how the human brain really thinks and how, we all move together and engage in civil dialogue and the backing science behind it. But I ended up starting ASU's Juris Doctorate program. So I'm in my second year of law school now. And I remembered when I was in college that one of my students that I TA'd for Barrett was one of the competitors of, I believe it was the 2023 Regents Cup. And he had sung the praises of it so heavily. And I got really excited for it every single year when it came around. And I was always following the news about it. And, I just decided this last fall, that I was going to just throw my hat into the ring. And lo and behold, here I am now. So, yeah.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things about the Regents Cup is how it brings people together with that sort of shared experience, and creates this community around it, not just of people who are participating in it, but people who come to watch it and people who come to view it because they're so interested in the topic. So during the application process, one of the things that I remember doing and remember fondly is writing an essay about a topic that's then published on the Arizona Board of Regents website. Andrea, I was wondering if you could tell us what the topic for these essays was this year, and then both of you what your essays were about.
Yeah, so I believe, if I remember correctly, that the essay was about civil discourse and responsibility, which is some of the main themes that we're talking about this year at the Regents Cup. It's about civil discourse, responsibility, and free speech. When I wrote mine, I was writing specifically about my experiences when I was doing my honors thesis at Barrett. I did a lot of research with students with ADHD because I had heard a lot of things from my students about how they felt like, in many ways, the college environment is much more difficult to navigate with ADHD. Which might seem like kind of out of left field for a discussion of civil discourse and free speech, but it was one of the most important things that I've ever done in my academic career thus far, because it was people talking with brutal honesty about their shared experiences. about something that maybe isn't talked about as much, which is disability in the college environment. And I was really, really, really impressed by being able to talk to everybody and see what their experiences were. And, I wrote about civil discourse and free speech because when people are able to use their voices, everybody can see improvement in society.
Yeah. And Shavya?
Yeah, so when I was approaching this topic of civil discourse and free speech, I wanted to think of it from a more systems perspective, especially with how, sources of news function in America, how governments respond to that, how, watchdog entities that we like to call, nonprofit organizations that all kind of keep a tab on who's doing what. I'm simply fascinated by that idea of everyone is keeping an eye on each other, and because it's kind of this trust that's built on making sure that we're all able to civilly talk to each other and engage in this form of discourse. I thought it would be great to kind of hone into the idea of how important it is to you have a dissenting opinion to hear about and to think about, because that's what ultimately really helps us engage with a society that upholds those values of free speech.
I really appreciate how you both brought up civil discourse in your answer. That's an ideal that both the Center for American Institutions and the Regents Cup competition really emphasizes. And as we talked about with Dr. Bryan, the debate tournament is structured to promote civil discourse, especially through the questioning period. You've got a half hour of questions, which can shock a lot of debaters who come into the room and find out that actually they're not talking; they're answering questions. I know it shocked me. I was wondering if the two of you could talk about what you expected going into the Regents Cup competition, going into practices, and how those expectations were maybe subverted if the process was a little bit different than you expected. Shravya, we can start with you.
Yeah, so I come from a experience background as a debater from my high school years,
Did you
and
do public forum or LD or policy?
I did public policy.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so it was I was kind of expecting a similar kind of approach to this debate, and then I realized it's very different in the way that you're kind of speaking and engaging with the audience. In normal traditional debate styles, it's very fast fire esque. You kind of say your points, the opponents say theirs, and then you guys spend the rest of the round really kind of knacking at each other's points. But I think the really unique and special thing that the Regents Cup style of debate does is that it allows you to actually engage with the points of the opponent from a way where you are respectfully seeing their side of the argument. And it's not that you are trying to win the debate necessarily, it's that you are contributing your perspectives from the side that you are presenting on. And I think this is a really, again, special way that the Regents Cup kind of plays into how you're able to talk to the audience and the judges from really analyzing the issue from how does it impact us in our everyday lives? How does it impact the world broadly? And I think that's something really special that this particular style of debate has.
Yeah. And Andrea?
Yeah, I really have appreciated the style of Regents Cup, going off of everything that Shavya just said. Um, I come from, I did theater a lot when I was in high school and college, and I was in the performing arts. And, I'm in law school, so I do a lot of oral argument and, you know, like the mock trial, moot court type stuff. Which has always been really fun, but for me, the format and style of the Regents Cup was like a breath of fresh air outside of everything that I'm doing in law school right now. Because in law school, I feel like there's this very big seriousness about like it's my way or the highway when it comes to a lot of oral arguments and competition and debate that we do. But the Regents Cup is very different because I think that it's structured so that each team really has to recognize everybody's viewpoints before they go into their considerations and their arguments. And it's just, as I said earlier, it's a total breath of fresh air for me, because it's really nice to try and come together with people and determine, well, maybe, maybe there's not everything that I'm right about. And I really like that sort of environment of it, because I think that's the only way that civil discourse thrives, is through agreement that we can disagree.
That's a really fantastic way of putting it. And I really appreciate what both of you said about it being a breath of fresh air coming from a high school debate background myself. I remember going into my first practice and expecting this incredibly adversarial debate process. And in fact, it was collaborative. It feels like you're working with the other team of debaters to reach a shared solution. So I was wondering, on that same theme of civil discourse, of collaboration in discussions of policy, if the two of you could give an example of a practice debate that you've had, or on one of the topics that you're discussing this year, of how you've collaborated to reach that idea, that policy idea, rather than engaged in that adversarial process. Andrea, we'll start with you.
So my debate partner and I, Rena, have been meeting pretty much every day for the last like week and a half together. Like we haven't met on my birthday. Like we're like super locked in on this. But one of the things that we've been doing is we've been talking about specifically counters and rebuttals, because we feel like we're both very comfortable at this point with our cases. And so our big thing that we're trying to work towards and make sure that we're strong on is knowing what the other team would like to say in response, right? So, given the sort of the difference in environment between the Regents Cup and other debate, it's been really refreshing for me to work with my debate partner, and she and I will go head to head and debate the affirmative and the negation on our cases, to get to practice, right? And I have noticed that in a lot of other cases where I have like oral argument and stuff like that, I don't really do that as much with my partners. We're kind of just repeating the same things over and over again. We're kind of just working on rewrites and edits. But the fact that we can sit there and try and brainstorm any idea under the sun that someone might, argue in response, has just been really, it's been really a great time, because I feel like I've definitely broadened my viewpoints and my horizons when it comes to how everybody thinks about the world.
Yeah. And Shavya?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of really interesting topics. One of the topics that we're going to be debating for this competition upcoming soon is centered on AI, and I just have to really appreciate the relevancy and the importance of talking about such a popular topic, because whether we like it or not, AI is here, and we don't often have a time to kind of sit and really think about what are the implications that we're kind of integrating this technology into our life. And I think by participating in Regents Cup, I've really been able to kind of explore it from another angle that I hadn't previously known that was even possible to look at. So my partner and I, Ryan, we've always been very cognizant of how do we kind of look at the particular topics in relevancy to our time frame, and what does it mean for us as young professionals going into the workforce. What would this topic look like? So that's something that I really have to say kudos to for the Regents Cup, for just having these really key issues that we're able to engage with in that collaborative setting that you mentioned.
I really appreciate how you mentioned that we're able, on these topics that seem like they're barreling at us like a freight train, and there's no time to think about it, we're able to take a deep breath and sit and talk about it and think about it in that collaborative way. And being able to do that with your partner, Andrea, I remember last year with my partner, Alina, we would swap off who cooked dinner for practice that night. She would cook dinner and then I would cook dinner, and we got to become really good friends. Good debate partners, but also really good friends through that. And so being able to take that deep breath and talk about these weighty issues with somebody you trust, it can be an incredible experience. But of course, as much as we like to talk about our partners and the other team of debaters, there's other people in the room. You've got a panel of very distinguished judges. The Regents Cup tournament is a prestigious tournament, and it gets individuals from all over the country, academics, politicians, members of the Arizona Supreme Court, the Arizona State Legislature, the executive branch, nationally known journalists, to come and judge the competition. And one of the most important parts of speaking, of argumentation, is knowing your judges and learning about them and thinking about how they might approach the issue. I was wondering if the two of you could speak to some of the ways that you're planning on sort of helping or identifying the ways that your judges might approach the issue. Shavya, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think one thing that we have to really keep in mind for Regents Cup is the uniqueness that it shares, that, it's within Arizona. So all of us are really united by, the fact that we're all Arizonans. We know, what are the crazy things that happen in Arizona? What does our daily life look like? And I think when we approach these cases and, any storytelling, anything like that, just keeping in mind that, people that who are like within you in that room, who are your judges, the audience, whoever it may be, just relating to that shared experience that we have. I think it's really important to tap into that and, talk from a point where you're able to really lay out your points and your plans or your uh, talks from a point where the audience is able to understand and they're able to kind of reflect on what you said. It's not more so that we're kind of forcing them to like push or be thinking about our points, but it's more of a very gentle collaboration where we say our points and we really urge for the audience to kind of reflect, what does that mean? What does it mean through our shared experiences when we consider that point? So yeah.
That's a really insightful point, Travia. So often when we talk about policy discussions and then thinking about where people are coming from, we land on sort of that left right spectrum, and everything's filtered through our partisan political affiliations. But you citing, you know, a lot of the judges and a lot of the debaters are Arizonans. And so we have the shared identity as folks from Arizona. We have a shared emphasis on different issues, a shared way of looking at issues. I really appreciate how you cited a sort of nonpartisan way that we have those shared connections of perception. Andrea, is there another nonpartisan way that you can think of that so you've been thinking about might unite the judges and has been in mind as you've written your cases and your arguments?
Yeah, coming from a background now that is completely overwhelmed by law school and the law and all that comes with it, um, they teach you very quickly in law school to get away from the partisan thinking. Um, you know, I think I came into law school thinking about, oh, well, I want to be a plaintiff's lawyer. I can't believe evil doctors would commit medical malpractice. And I walk out of it and I'm thinking, there's two sides to every single story, right? I can't believe someone would commit a crime. Oh my gosh, there's two sides to every story, right? Everybody is innocent until proven guilty, that whole 9 yards. So for me, coming into the Regents Cup, it almost felt like a instinctual at this point to think nonpartisan, because at the end of the day, you're taught in law school, don't think with a partisan viewpoint, because you're gonna get yourself into trouble if you do that. And it's really refreshing to me to see, especially when it comes to who all is judging, who all is coming to this debate from every single different major that's coming to this debate. I saw someone who is doing a French program, which is really cool. My debate partner is doing a minor in Japanese, and she's trying to go to med school. Like, there are so many different really cool backgrounds that everybody's coming to the table with, that I feel like, for me at least, to enter into something like this and not think without a partisan lens, like to think, let me rephrase that, to think with a biased or like left right viewpoint is completely a waste of time in this, because at the end of the day, civil discourse is and always has been much bigger than the political parties that it associates with.
It's such an important thing to remember, and I appreciate you both bringing it up, that there are so many different ways to look at policy issues, not just Democratic, not just Republican. I am wondering if you could give an example of how, on one of the debate topics that you're discussing this year, a sort of nonpartisan uh, perspective or view shaped your interpretation of that topic, shaped your argument on that topic in a specific way. Andrea, we'll start with you.
There were a couple of different debates that I think really did that for me. So going into all of our debates, I think that the first debate that we do really starts with more like scientific and quantitative methods. We're talking about how AI impacts people, right? But as you go further into the debates and you're prepping the later stage competition questions, a lot of them are much more morally focused, right? There's one of them that's specifically about if the federal government can regulate social media, right? And I think that was one of the cases that I think really opened up my eyes about this, to not look at things from a partisan or nonpartisan perspective, just to look at this as we're all sharing our viewpoints, because everybody has taken their answers to the case in such different ways. I've seen someone take it from a perspective of this is a public health crisis, to this should be a states' rights issue, to this is a constitutionality issue. I've even seen people saying that, like, there's issues with the VPN and cybersecurity of it, right? And I think that the social media debates specifically have shown me a lot about the fact that we don't need to rely on some sort of alignment left or right, because it definitely in later stages becomes more of a moral debate to a certain extent.
Absolutely. Shavya?
Yeah, echoing off of what Andrea said, the same debate topic, which is social media regulation. I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at the core issues that this case presents, it's all that, whether you look at it from any angle, really, before you are like realizing that this really is a nonpartisan issue, is that it starts from the same concern. Everyone on each side of the argument has the same concern of how is it impacting the youth right now? Why? What can we do to kind of stop it? What can we do to mitigate it? And this topic really opened up, my perspective, because oftentimes you'll hear a lot of news that is maybe pushing only one side of the argument, or you only hear like a more popular version of the debate, more simplified down. But once you kind of look at it from a systems perspective, what's going to impact what? What's the cause and effect of this? You really see that this is something that ties into all parts of how we function as a democracy in America. So, absolutely echoing what Andrea said, these issues aren't just, left or right. They're really, it's the same concern from every side, and you really have to come up with a collaborative solution, a collaborative lens to really find a frame point where you're able to kind of start putting that policy into practice.
Collaboration is such a good way to put it. And I sometimes think with the Regents Cup that debate is maybe the wrong thing to call the activity, because it's not a debate. A debate is adversarial, but it's such a collaborative process to go into the Regents Cup tournament. And that's something that I know in my experience as a debater on the ASU team, that the ASU coaches really emphasize throughout the coaching process and the rehearsal process, the practice process. I was wondering if the two of you could speak to how the ASU coaching process and how all of those practices that you've been doing has helped you suit up for the debate, has helped you prepare. Shravya, we'll start with you.
Yes, for sure. Of course, big shout out to Dr. Brian and Adam, who is our debate coach. Both of them been super helpful, super supportive in, kind of really challenging how we are approaching these cases, and really just pushing us to kind of grow into, better professionals by the end of the debate season. Throughout my time from the past couple of months of practice, I've just really been encouraged to kind of really think outside of the box. Already the Regent style cup of debate is already kind of way different from your traditional debating methods, as you said. But really trying to sit there and engage with your partner, and then your peers on the opposition, and then kind of think about what is it that we're trying to solve today. What is it? What framework are we trying to kind of implement today? And I think just being able to recognize how can I analyze this issue critically from a place where I'm able to withhold biases, from a place where I'm able to approach it with such a collaborative mindset, I think has definitely aided me in my other life skill areas as well. For my other classes, I've started to look at assignments related to essay writing or anything like that. How can I really analyze this issue from a place that gives both sides of the story and gives that full understanding of the picture? So yeah, the debate practices have really just helped me kind of uh, put that theory into practice, with really trying to understand things from a more broader perspective, and understanding what are the reasons for that systemic issue to arise.
Yeah. And Andrea?
Yeah, I really have to give it to Dr. Simmons and Dr. Bryan on all of their coaching, because Adam and Dr. Bryan have just been so helpful to no end on all of these things that we've been working on. We truly have such a talented group coaching us. I mean, even walking in on the first couple of weeks where we were just talking about how we structure arguments, and I came from a science background, so a lot of my science brain kind of sometimes gets in the way of my debate and policy brain, because at the end of the day, when you're talking about science, the root is kind of similar to with debate, where you're all thinking of the same problem and you're looking for different solutions. But I think that there's a very big difference in the way that you debate between science and the way that you debate in policy. So for me, having someone to walk me back into that process really helped, and it's been very beneficial in both being in law school and being in a legal profession as well. I'm a law clerk for a small firm in Scottsdale. And for me, being able to, sort of think with a broader viewpoint, I'm getting to use and flex my legal brain a lot more. And I feel like I'm looking at it from a more well-rounded perspective at the end of the day. Because like I think sometimes when you're thinking about an argument, you get really, really deep into the weeds and you're trying to think of the little tiny solutions. But this competition is much more broad, right? We're thinking about broad issues and we're thinking of broad ways that we can solve those issues. So having the coaching that we've had, having the way that we're talking about how to convince someone, not just how to show that you're right, right? Because a lot of people will listen, but maybe they won't agree with you because maybe, you said something wrong at the beginning, right? It's all about how you get people to listen and agree. And I think that's been a really, really big skill that I've learned this semester, because sometimes our differences can divide us so significantly, but if everybody is able to listen and agree and engage in civil discourse respectfully, I think that it's much more beneficial in the long run for getting things done.
Yeah, I really like what you said about what both of you said about emphasizing the broad nature of these topics and all of the different ways that you can approach them and all of the different implications that that might have. And to do that, you need to have a group of people with a diverse set of backgrounds, not just in terms of their lived experience, but also in terms of what they're studying, what their academic backgrounds are. And so having that sort of science focus, for example, being able to come at it from a STEM oriented perspective, just broadens the lens of what we're able to think about in terms of this issue. With the few minutes we've got left, the Regents Cup debate and storytelling tournament. And before we get there, I do want to give a quick shout out to Mary Joseph on the storytelling team, another great coach of the ASU team. We were unfortunately unable to get a storyteller with us today. But we've just got a few hours before all of that coaching and all of that practicing is going to come to fruition, and the Regents Cup tournament will occur. I was wondering, as a last question, what you guys are most excited for the 2026 Regents Cup speech and debate tournament. Andrea, we'll start with you.
And there's a lot of things that I'm really excited about. I'm excited to get away for a weekend and engage in, academic and civil discourse. And, instead of thinking about my midterms and my finals, I get to go and, do debate, which I really love. And I think that a lot of people on our team would definitely agree with me on that. But for me, I think I'm very excited um, to be in front of a lot of people who are very valuable to the state of Arizona and to the country and to the world, and see what their perspectives are on the ways that we're talking about these issues. I'm really excited to see too what U of A and NAU have to say about a lot of these issues, because I've spent the entire semester practicing with my team, and so we're all a little bit comfortable with our own arguments, but I'm very excited to see what everybody else has to say. um, and outside of that, I think I'm very excited to engage in something that's so important to a world that is so polarized right now. To be able to go for a weekend and talk to people all weekend about the things that are potentially problems in our society and the ways that we can solve them. And, being up for scholarship money is nice, yeah, but the fact that we can all come together and just argue and talk and try and find solutions on things that maybe a lot of people in our Congress or in our judiciary are really scared of and don't know the answers. It really gives me hope for being the next generation that gets to try and be the solution to a lot of these problems.
And Shavya?
Absolutely agree with what Andrea said. Of course, it's going to be a really refreshing weekend. Kind of stretching my brain in a different way that I'm used to from, regular homework assignments or quizzes or anything like that. I'm really looking forward to the community that we're going to meet at Regents Cup. I'm just really thrilled to meet with, again, the people of our society who really are shaping our public policy right now, who are contributing to it, and I'm excited to see how they are going to kind of go forward with their thoughts on these topics, and as well as what the other teams from U of A and NAU will also say as well. Just as Andrea said, I think it's going to be a really again refreshing weekend, and I really can't wait to kind of just engage in this sort of a think tank environment where we're all able to kind of really take a moment and reflect on what's happening in our current, democracy right now, what our current state looks like. And yeah,
Yeah.
super excited for that.
It was always a lot of fun for me debating, to get in the room with an NAU team or a U of A team and see that they had thought about the topic in an entirely different way than any way that I had ever thought about the topic. I'd spent 4 months trying to think of every possible argument that we could have about AI or whatever the topic was. And then we'd walk into the room and they'd say something that we hadn't even considered for a moment. And it was just another reminder of how broad that spectrum is, and that spectrum of ideas. And that's always been one of the things I've really enjoyed about the tournament. And I'm happy and excited to hear that y'all are really excited for that. But as excited as we are to hear what U of A and NAU have to say about the topic, we are, of course, hoping for an ASU victory, for ASU to bring back the cup to Tempe. Uh, and so, if we have, I know that we've got a lot of students who listen to this podcast. If you're interested in participating in civil discourse, in broadening the way that you think about public policy and politics, in maybe winning some scholarship money, in talking to the smartest people at ASU and NAU and the U of A, I would absolutely recommend that you try out for the Regents Cup team next year for 2027 to, of course, retain the Regents Cup that we've won in 2026. And so, without further ado, it's time for the two of you to get ready to go win the Regents Cup. Thank you so much for joining me, and have an excellent rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Jack. You have a great
Thank
one.
you for having us. Thank you.
Yes, of course. And the best of luck.